This is a math lesson over sorting and classifying that I will be teaching to my special education group, grade 3. This activity will cover that the students will use a Venn diagram to sort objects. The state standard that this meets is Standard 4. The students use concepts and procedures of data analysis in a variety of situations. Benchmark 2. The students collects, organizes, displays, explains, and interprets numerical and non-numerical data sets, including the use of concrete objects in a variety of situations. The technology standard that this will meet is Technology Operations and Concepts. 6A, students demonstrate a sound understanding of technology concepts, systems, and operations, and students understand and use technology systems. My instructional objectives for this lesson will be that the students will be able to sort objects using a Venn diagram with 90% accuracy, and also that they will be able to complete the workbook pages with 90% accuracy. In preparation for this lesson, I will need the Number World's Level D teacher guide. I will also need the Unit 6, Week 1, Lesson 4, Sorting and Classifying. Extra items that I will need are a poster board with a Venn diagram on it, groups of objects to sort, masking tape, and paper and pencil. I will also need the building block CD that will go on the computer, and I will need copies of workbook pages 8 and 9 for each one of my students. The active participation on the students' part will be that they will be acting out a Venn diagram. They will also be sorting objects on a Venn diagram, and they will then be completing a workbook page to check for understanding. Since this is being taught to a special education group, there are still other adaptations that I can provide for my students. And one is that if my students are struggling to read the questions on the worksheet, then I usually read those questions aloud to them. And also, throughout the entire lesson, I do often check for understanding by asking them simple questions. And I also have my students repeat directions so then I know that they understand what I'm asking them to do. For the assessment part of this lesson is that one, I will be assessing my students on how they create their Venn diagram and the sorting of their objects, and this is something I will check visually. Also, the students will be graded on the workbook pages. And then at the end of the lesson, I will complete an informal checklist at the end of each lesson for each one of my students. Also, I will be asking informal questions throughout the lesson and providing instant feedback throughout the activities that we will be doing. There are variations to this lesson in that this lesson can be taught to students in grades 1st through 3rd, to either regular ed students or special education students. Now on to the actual lesson. This lesson is broke down into 4 parts. The first part is a warm-up, which is the concept building. First, what I will do is we will create a Venn diagram on the floor using masking tape. And this is where my students will actually act out using a Venn diagram. And what I will do is I will have one of my students stand on one of the outside circles who is wearing something different from the rest of the group. I will then choose another student to stand on one of the other sides of the circle who again is wearing something different from the rest of the group. Then I would choose another student to stand in the overlapping part who is wearing something that both the other students has on. Then what I would do is I would have the group try to figure out how and why I have them sorted the way that they are. If after a while my students are struggling to figure out the rule, then I will give them clues to help them figure this out. And once they figure that out, we will then act out the Venn diagram again and see if they can get the clues faster. The next part is the engage, and the first one underneath this is a skill building. Once we are done acting out the Venn diagram, we will then return to the table, and each student will be given a Venn diagram and a group of objects to sort. First, I will start with simple objects and work towards more complex objects. What I will do is with the objects that I have given my students, they will have to figure out 2 rules by which to sort the objects. Once they have figured out those 2 rules, they will then write them on a piece of paper and they will keep them secret from everybody else. Once I have seen their 2 rules that are written on paper, I will then have the students place their objects that follow their 2 rules inside the circles of the Venn diagram, and then place the objects that fit both their rules in the overlapping part of the circle. I will then check the students' Venn diagrams to make sure that they have done this correctly. If they have not done this correctly, then we will work them out together to try to fix where the objects should go. Once I have checked these and everything is good, then they are allowed to clear off their mats. The next part of the engage is the strategy building. Once I have checked everybody's mat, we will then have the students take turns demonstrating their secret rules using a Venn diagram. And what I'll do is I'll have the students place their objects one by one on their Venn diagram, and then try to have the rest of the group figure out what their secret rules are. Then once everybody has had a turn demonstrating their secret rules, then the students will complete the workbook pages 8 and 9 on their own. Then the next step is the reflect part, and there are 2 parts to this. The first one is the extended response. Once everybody has completed their workbook pages, we will then go over those and I will answer any questions that they might have. Then we will also have a discussion based on the reflect prompt on the bottom of page 9. And what the students should have done is they should have created a Venn diagram comparing themselves to another one of their classmates. And then what I would do is I would have the students share their Venn diagrams with the group. Once they've all shared with the group, then I will ask the question, was it harder to think of different characteristics or similar characteristics when you were comparing yourself to your classmate? The second part to the reflect is a real world application, and this is where we just again have another discussion, in that I would discuss with the students situations in which things are sorted in real life and why it's necessary to sort those items. So I would give them the example of that stores are organized by groups of items so that shoppers can quickly find what they are looking for. I would then ask my students if they could give me any other examples of when we might sort things out in the real world. And then the last part is the assessment. And this is where I will do the informal assessment with the 2 checklists. One is for the skill building activity, and I can check off whether the students did or did not do the following questions. And then I can also have another checklist for the strategy building activities, where again I can check off whether the students did or did not answer these questions. And this just allows me to know how involved my students were throughout this lesson. So in summary, my students should have learned how to sort objects using a Venn diagram. They also should have been able to create 2 rules by which to sort their items. And then at the very end, once this lesson is over, my students can then get on the computer and play the Building Stairs 2 from the Building Block CD that goes with the program. And this just reinforces all of the skills that were taught throughout this lesson. And the references that I used are for the technology standards. I used the website to get those. And then I used the Kansas State Department of Education website to retrieve my mathematics standards, and also the Number World's teacher guide. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy.